The May 8th, 2025 regular meeting of the Town of Colonial Beach Planning Commission is called to order. This is a properly advertised meeting where members of the public were invited to attend in person or to view on the YouTube live streaming platform. Thank you for attending or watching tonight's Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission is comprised of 7 citizen volunteer members appointed by Town Council for 4-year terms. The Commission reviews and recommends to the Town Council in the land use policies of the town in the comprehensive plan, makes recommendations regarding applications for special use permits, special exceptions, rezonings, and the Unified Development Ordinance text amendments, and makes annual recommendations regarding the town's capital improvement plan. All such recommendations are made after the conduct of a public hearing and with reference to applicable laws, statutes, ordinances, and procedures. The Planning Commission is committed to openness and transparency in the conduct of its meetings. This meeting is being recorded as a public record and to help town staff create its minutes. Per adopted bylaws, Planning Commission regular and supplementary meetings offer 2 public comment opportunities, once during a public hearing and once during general public comment. Comments made via the YouTube live streaming video are not considered official public comment. Please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, we have 6 of our 7 members in person today with Commissioner Nathan Howell remotely online, so 6 members are present, a quorum exists, and we may proceed. Approval of the agenda. To the agenda?
Yes, sir. I would like to remove the approval of the minutes for December the 12th, 2024. I thought that I would have that draft to you, but I just got access to SharePoint to review it for any changes. So we'll put that and hopefully get your minutes caught up so you'll have some reading for your next agenda to get the minutes caught back up to where we need to be. So I do apologize for that, but I would ask for you to remove item 6.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
Second.
All right, perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we have the amended agenda to remove item 6.1. Next, we'll go to number 5, introduction of the new assistant town manager.
Yes, so Mr. Chairman, we have with us this evening in the audience Mr. Kyler Brower. He is the new assistant town manager. He's been with the town for 3 weeks. So we definitely want to introduce you all to him. He will be working with us in community development and zoning, as, overseeing our department as we move forward as the assistant town manager. So we welcome him and wanted to give him an opportunity to tell you a few jokes, introduce himself, whatever. Do you juggle?
I don't juggle and I don't tell jokes. So.
Okay, well, there he goes.
But, Planning Commission members, it's a pleasure to be here today to introduce myself. My name is Kyler Brower. They stole me away from the great state of Utah. As you can tell, I'm still proud of my heritage. But I came from Pleasant Grove City, Utah, a city of about 38,000. And my background is about 10 years in government, where I spent 4.5 with the United States Senate, working for 2 senators. I've worked for mayors, county council members, and 2 cities. So my knowledge is diverse, but still learning. And so I'm looking forward to working with our departments here, our staff, and obviously our council and planning commission to help Colonial Beach grow in the ways we want. And that includes excellent zoning, excellent rules and regulations, and just deciding how we want to move forward. So looking forward to it. Any questions? I love it.
Yeah. All right, next we'll move to item 7, Planning Commission committee reports and commissioner comments. Do we have any committee reports?
No.
Any? All right.
Address the alliance.
The quarterly alliance meeting, yes. The alliance, go ahead.
So the quarterly alliance meeting, I was attending that last year, but I am not really able to attend it anymore, so we need somebody else to pick up that ball and take it. The thing about that meeting is it's on a Wednesday and it's at noon, and that's why it's difficult. But if someone else could do that, that would be a good
I
thing.
just wanted to say, I've had the pleasure of serving on that committee for a couple of years, and so I hope that someone else will consider doing that now.
It's a pretty informative meeting, and, because all the businesses come, and they all talk about like what they're doing, what's going on, so, it's good exposure from that perspective. Don't anyone jump.
And generally, I am available on Wednesdays at lunchtime,
It's only quarterly also, so
on 4 Wednesdays at lunchtime.
you think you could do
I
that?
think I could do
Thank
that
you.
if that would be a contribution to the planning commission.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
All right. Moving on to item number 8, the general public. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yep.
I just had a comment to make, which really, well, I should do that. I just wanted to pick up on something that happened at the town council meeting last night in terms of reference to the planning commission and the work that we've been doing. And that was kudos from, I think, at least 2 members of the public to how the CIP had been presented this year. And I think we all know that that is thanks to the work that Ms. Odom has done in formatting that, putting it into a series of priorities. And I just thought we should reflect that. Those congratulations here to Ms. Odom for the work she'd done to make this readable and understandable for both our town council and members of the public. Just following on from that, as we may all know, the town has identified potential sources of funding for CIP projects, which I don't think we've had as a defined revenue stream in the past. And while there's nothing, to the best of my knowledge, been appropriated yet, I think there is the potential of a stream of revenue coming available at the end of each financial year, a rollover of excess funds. How our town council will deal with that, I think, is yet to be seen. But I just wanted to say that to the Planning Commission, because that will make the next CIP that we work on an even more important document, because there will actually be potential funding for the items that we put on there, whereas previously, and I don't hope I'm not belittling it, but previously it has simply been a wish list without any opportunity to fund the activities. So I just wanted to share that with the members of the public and the Planning Commission so that you understood the importance of that in the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you for the update. All right, moving on to item 8, general public comment period is provided at each regular meeting. General public comment is reserved for comments regarding any matter related to planning commission business that is not listed on the agenda for public hearing. Are there any members of the public present in town center that would like to make a comment to the topic relevant to the planning commission? Seeing none, do we have?
I have a question
Okay.
about that. So in the past, when we've gotten emails, they've either been read into the record. I'm not sure if that's what we want to do now, but for those that are submitting their emails, are we going to include them as part of the record?
I don't think they would be in the record because they would be read in, but I don't believe we're going to include them in like the minutes.
Right, so where would they be reflected,
So-
the comments that we get from the public?
Pardon me, Mr. Chairman, if I might. That question came up recently to town council, and I had talked with Mr. Thompson briefly about feeling like the planning commission should follow the same policy discussion as council. The town council at this point has decided not to read in public comment into the record. That was an item that was permitted and came about through COVID discussion. And they felt like at this point, you know, you all are gonna, if emails come in to me, to the planning commission, most of the time, people are gonna know to copy you all too. But if I get something about an item on your agenda or a public comment relative to planning that I see you have not been copied on, I will make sure that you get a copy of it. But we won't be reading them into the record following the council's policy, and they won't be made part of the minutes. However, each planning commission meeting has a folder that is the meeting folder, and those public comments will be put in the meeting folders. If it's relative to, and that's general public comment, if it's relative to an item before you, like a zoning text amendment or a conditional use permit, something of that nature, then what we'll do from a staff standpoint is obviously ensure you all have copies or have been emailed correspondence that we receive. That's part of your packet. And then staff will summarize. For instance, we received 3 emails in support and 2 emails in opposition, generally stating blank. And they also are going to be available in case files for people to review. And that's my pre-COVID process that I've been familiar with, and it sounded like with the council action, that's where they were going with that.
Question, where's this file or folder that you just mentioned?
It's in the Community Development Zoning Office. And then also your meeting agendas and packets are available online. So if there are letters and things that we receive relative to an actual case, that will be part of the packet.
I think the one thing I would.
I'm sorry, if they're received in time, right? If I get them, you know, and generally, the best rule for that is they need to be received by the close of business the day prior to the hearing, because staff has to have time to get them together and get them, you know, out to you. And that's what I would suggest, that if you all agree that that would be the cutoff time for things to be, you know, otherwise, people need to come to the meeting. If it's important enough, I think they will.
Yeah, and we have town council's decision for how they handle stuff. I would just ask that maybe before the next meeting, staff takes a look at the planning commission bylaws and make sure we're meeting all of our own bylaw requirements with reading or storing written comment. All right, tonight, item 9.1, the public hearing on zoning text amendment 25-02. If staff could read us in on that.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, back in August of 2024, the council inquired about the referral that they had made in October 2023 relative to whether or not the town should consider increasing the FAR regulation, that's the floor area ratio, within the residential R1 and R2 is specifically what they were looking for at the time, but the R2 zoning districts, because they had received comments from development communities saying that, you know, the FAR was unreasonable, the FAR was restricting development. They weren't, I mean, there were certain, you know, homes and things that they weren't able to sell because of the FAR limitation that was at 0.4 in the R1 and R2 districts. So at that time, the Planning Commission had a meeting. There were a few people that spoke at the meeting, but the Planning Commission in 2023 voted to recommend to council that the 0.4 FAR limitation not be increased. And so the council had that recommendation, and then back in August of last year, they asked about it again and that's when you all participated in the joint work session that occurred in October. Out of that joint work session, you know, the council asked for the Planning Commission to reconsider the FAR requirements. I think there was some dialogue that helped, you know, open up some of that discussion. And part of that was the Planning Commission agreeing to reach out and receive input from stakeholders, citizens as well as builders, into the FAR requirement, what the concerns were about that. And so you all participated in a meeting at your in a work session, at your March 13th meeting. And we had some very good discussion, I felt like, at that work session. And in your packet this evening, there is the summary that I provided to you last month. But I included it again, just for your memory, relative to, some of the questions that we had, like what are the reasons you believe the town should have a maximum FAR? What's the benefit? Why should there not be a maximum FAR? Based on all of that, staff came to you last month with a recommendation that would provide a clear definition of floor area ratio, definition that has been advertised for a public hearing to add its zoning text amendment 2502. It would add a definition of the term floor area ratio to the definitions in the zoning ordinance. And then it would also modify the definition of the term in Article 20 for private garage, because in the FAR definition, a garage or a private garage would be excluded from the calculation of the FAR. And so if you look at attachment 1 in your memo in your packet, the floor area ratio as defined, the floor area ratio of the principal building on any lot or tract of land is the sum of the total areas of all floors within the building or structure measured between the exterior faces of the exterior walls divided by the total lot area. That's how you come up with the floor area ratio. For a detached single-family dwelling, the sum of the total area of all floors of the dwelling shall not include a maximum area of 576 square feet, 24 feet by 24 feet area, to accommodate an attached private garage. So that's the definition that we propose. It will help to eliminate some of the confusion that the building community has said they had relative to, the interpretation from staff. This is how we have been applying that, except for the garage exception. We have, up until, if this amendment passes, we were also including the attached garage in the floor area ratio. A detached garage would not count because that's an accessory structure and that's not part of the principal dwelling. But in this case, with the new definition, the detached garage would still not count, but also an attached garage up to 576 square feet would also not count. It would not change the regulation in the R1 or R2 districts relative to the .4 FAR that needs to be met, but it does allow for the garage area not to count. The building community stated that, that was really their main concern, was that someone may want, in Colonial Beach, you have a minimum 5,000 square foot lot. And on a minimum 5,000 square foot lot with a .4 FAR, the total floor area that you could have and meet the .4 on a 5,000 square foot lot is 2,000 square feet. And so the building community said, if you had a 400 square foot garage, that would let basically the living area of the house be limited to 1,600 square feet. They felt like that would not accommodate some of the clients that they've had that want to have a family, and they really would like to have maybe a 2,000 square foot house with a garage addition. And so this would accommodate that. The second definition for your consideration in the public hearing this evening is that of a private garage. And if you look on page 3 of the memorandum in the attachment 1, that is listed there. And I won't go through those changes, but basically, if you'll see, there were some additions to the definition of private garage. Those are shown as underlined text. And then there was a little bit of the language that was stricken, and that would be removed if this goes through. And I'll be glad to answer any questions about that. Generally, what this definition does is to establish that, a private garage is, its principal purpose is for the keeping of vehicles. And I added in here that it's not only automobiles, but it also could be recreational vehicles, just for clarity. and that it could be up to 3, and it could be a combination of, these. But generally, it's, a maximum of 3 automobiles. In other words, if you can fit 3 cars in it under that square footage, fine. But if you start to get larger than that, then it's no longer a private garage. This also includes a statement for clarification that if any portion of a private garage or the whole private garage is proposed to be converted to living space, then it would require approval of the zoning administrator, as the change would be, they may still be able to meet the FAR if they want to change part of the garage into living space, but that's going to be something that will be checked at the time of that conversion. Now, when you convert a garage to living space, you do have to get a building permit for that, or you're supposed to get a building permit for that, because there are different requirements in the building code for a garage space versus living space, as far as, types of insulation, windows, all of those things have to meet certain criteria. So we wouldn't be asking for anything that the building code really doesn't already require. But we would be looking for a zoning permit for that conversion, which we do now for renovations to existing structures. So I'll be glad to answer any questions, and we'll go from there.
Do we have any questions for staff?
I have questions.
Okay.
So, detached accessory building is, you're saying that is a garage space.
It can be.
Can it be anything else like an accessory dwelling unit
Yes.
for living purposes?
So this is only, I'm sorry, this is just to define what a private garage is. Now, there are other types of accessory structures that are permitted in the ordinance. This is just the definition of what a private garage is. Now, a private garage can be detached, and it can be attached.
With regard to the attached accessory building that is a dwelling, a living space, is that what would be allowed under this definition?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
With the attached accessory building as part of the development of that lot, that could be an auxiliary dwelling unit for accommodations, right?
No. No, ma'am.
No, okay.
No, ma'am.
So that's helpful. So an accessory dwelling building could be
Yeah.
a storage facility? See, I was afraid of that.
It's okay, I can fix that.
She's gonna fix that part.
All right.
Yeah, so I was looking at, what we discussed at our previous meeting was that storage facilities, maybe a place to put equipment and stuff and store equipment, those would not be considered, even if they're attached, correct?
So if the area that is proposed is the area that we're proposing that would not count towards FAR is what would be a private garage. If they were going to use that space as a separate dwelling unit that's attached to the rest of the principal dwelling, then that would count towards the FAR. The part that wouldn't count towards the FAR is if it is a private garage. Now, the primary use of a private garage, right, is the storage of the vehicles. But that doesn't mean that the private garage couldn't have a workbench for tools and that kind of thing. It doesn't mean that the garage couldn't have, maybe there's only one car that's parked in the garage, and then there's like some exercise equipment or something. Some people do that in their garage. Or, have, that kind of thing. So it doesn't mean, but it still would not, it has to not be living area, habitable space.
Without permitting first.
If it is going to, if a private garage or an area that's part of a principal dwelling is going to be finished as habitable space, then it is going to count towards the FAR, right?
Okay.
If it is finished, it could still be finished, but be a private garage, meeting this definition, then it would not count towards FAR.
All right. And the follow-up to that, going further down on the definition, the new draft definition, regarding living space, would that also be like sleeping accommodation?
Yes,
Yes.
it could not include.
So theoretically, a person could build and have their garage attached and then a month later convert it to another bedroom?
No.
With a permit?
No, unless, if they are, if perchance that they built their house and they had enough room left in still complying with FAR. So, you know, the square footage of the house was something, but then later they said, you know, we really should have built that other bedroom. And they come in and they say, I want to put a bedroom in this area that I said was going to be a garage. We will evaluate that new area of the living space, the bedroom, to make sure that it meets now the dwelling that was new and now this extra bedroom. They still would have to meet the FAR requirement. If they do not, then they would, we wouldn't grant the permit. They would need to seek a variance.
I see, okay.
Yeah.
And
That's
I think in the definition here, we have, approved by the zoning administrator as a change of use. So if someone were to put a living space in their private garage, it no longer becomes a private garage because you go through the change of use.
Correct.
Commissioner Long, sorry. Two things. First is simple. Have we had any additional feedback from builders subsequent to the forum we had and the discussions we've already had on this addition to the buildable area?
I have had discussions individually with 3 different builders, 3 different participants in the meeting. And all 3 of them, I explained to them, you know, what you guys were looking at, what we were talking about last time, and that, and they all were pleased with what the outcome was.
Thank you for that. My other question, if I can just keep on going so you don't have to listen to me too many times. And this is based on a property that's being built in the town that I was looking at the other day. That has 2, above what I would call the ground floor level, the bottom level of the house, that is all parking garage, and then there are 2 living floors above that. So in a calculation for that property, which was not relevant now because it's being built, and I'm sure it was approved, I assume it was approved. If the garage space on that bottom level was more than this 576 square feet, then the additional garage space that was part of the construction would be counted within the 0.4 FAR calculation. Have I understood that correctly?
That is correct. Now, it would also, if it's, so if the that you're talking about you have in town, they're raised 3 feet over the base flood elevation in order to meet the floodplain standards for freeboard for the living space above the maximum flood elevation. And that part is open. If it's all open, we wouldn't count it, right? Because that is part of the freeboard that you're required to have. But if part of that area is enclosed, it would count if it exceeds the 576 square feet. See what I'm saying? So if I could drive under the house, basically it's on stilts, and I could drive under it, and it's open, we're not gonna count it. Just like we wouldn't count an open carport, right? Or we don't count an open deck. We wouldn't count that open area underneath. But if part of it is enclosed, we would count it if that total area exceeds the 576. See what I mean?
So a garage, by definition, has to be an enclosed space.
It is an enclosed space. If it's not enclosed, it's a carport.
Okay,
Right.
even though it's under the house.
And if it's not enclosed area, it doesn't count towards the FAR.
just as a thought for the Planning Commission, we did talk about concerns of buildings, and this doesn't apply to the building I was looking at, overwhelming their neighbours when we get huge structures next to, single-level homes. I would think we want to consider all those eventualities when we come to reconsider the R2 and other zoning, to make sure that we've considered all the possibilities as these regulations are interpreted. That would just be a suggestion for us in our future considerations.
And I would say, Mr. Chairman, if I might, that because a structure meets FAR, and because a structure meets height limitations, there is another section on the development standards in the ordinance in the R district, and that has to do with being compatible and harmonious with the surrounding area. So we've had a few tests of that language in the ordinance, and we've had some discussions even with the building community as it related to the work session that we have. And I think that it's still important for everyone to understand that from a staff standpoint, we will be paying attention to that. However, having clarity written into the ordinance based on, our discussions and any input we receive from the community on being able to best define that. For instance, if it's not appropriate for a 3-story house to be adjacent to a 1-story house, or what is that relationship, that we do define that clearly in the R district standards, which we will hope to start, within the next month or so.
Commissioner Hutchins?
Just a couple of questions. The 576 square feet, how did we arrive at that?
That's generally a 24 by 24, foot garage, which I know that's, there are 2-car garages that are smaller than that. I felt that was generous, a 24 by 24 garage. It was a call, basically of what kind of is a standard for a 2-car garage. You might see some that are smaller, and that's something that if you all think that's too much, I felt like it was appropriate.
Follow up to that, if half of that is then converted to a living space, how does that affect the FAR regulation?
So if they have room, so their house is of a certain size and.
Say they were at the limit.
Okay, so if
with-
they're at
with
the
garage.
limit, then they would not get approval from staff from a permit to convert half of that garage into living space, because then they would be exceeding the FAR. If they wanted to do that, then we would suggest that they would need to go forward for a variance before the Board of Zoning Appeals, which requires a public hearing process and a notification of the adjacent property owners. They would then go to the Board of Zoning Appeals to state their hardship and what their case is of why they need to make that change and need an exception to the ordinance.
Is the 24 by 24, is that something that the builders requested?
The builders kept speaking of a garage, a 2-car garage. They didn't give us a specific size. I have seen 2-car garages called 20 by 20. I've seen them, 2-car garages being stated as being 24 by 24. So I just was trying to be as lenient as we could. Obviously that doesn't mean everyone has to build a 24 by 24 garage, but they can build up to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I got one, and it's kind of minor, but I'm just trying to confirm how in the process, and I'll give a specific one, so hopefully make it easier. Let's say I own some land, and I decide I want to build a residential detached home on there. I probably have to go and I submit at some point a preliminary plot plan, is that what it's called? I hope I remember right. Okay. Is that at the point where the FAR is determined? And does that preliminary plot plan actually detail the outlines of the garage and the various interior living spaces?
So, yes, when someone applies today to build a new single-family dwelling, they're required to submit what's called a residential site plan. And we have a checklist that we give out to the builders that say, here's what needs to be shown on your residential site plan. The layout of that dwelling unit has to be shown on the land, how far it is from property boundaries, where the driveway is going to be, water sewer connections, all of that detail, what impervious cover you're going to have,
Yeah.
right? And then we get them also to put on that plan, here's the dwelling, and here's the area of the lot, so this is the FAR. But with that, we also require a copy of the building construction plans. And with the building construction plans, we'll be able to tell what the square footage is of, and can tell today.
So the
What the square-
construction plans are submitted at the time of the preliminary plot plan?
Yes, sir. And we review them, obviously, not for building code compliance, right? But we review them for, compliance with building height and those regulations that we have in the ordinance, FAR being one of them.
Well,
And
that
then,
makes sense, because if I had decided, okay, now I can go ahead and construct it, and I start constructing it, and then you come back later and tell me, no, it's sees it for, that would be
that wouldn't be very nice,
kind of
would it?
unfair.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Question.
Yes, sir.
On, you said earlier that the square footage would have been limited to 2,000, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So now can be 2,576 square feet?
That is correct. On a 5,000 square foot lot, one of the things that I keep saying is that people are saying, oh my gosh, you're limiting me to building a larger house. Well, no. 0.4 FAR relates to the size of your lot. So chances are you could even build a bigger house, and 576 square feet of it could be a garage if you had a bigger lot. But the minimum lot size in town to build on is 5,000 square feet. So that's why we are always talking about 0.4 is 2,000 square feet. But yes, they would be able to build 2,576 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
All right, do we have any further questions for staff?
Not so much questions. I just want to say that I am in favor of changing and defining this, because I was so impressed with the interaction of the builders and the commission, and we had very good dialogue going on. And I think that it was a key moment for us, really, to be able to move forward and accommodate without imposing strict or allowing even larger houses. So for me, allowing the garage to not be counted towards the FAR makes sense, because if they're going to build a garage, it's still going to have the square footage on the lot. So it seems to be accommodating of the builders, and I think it's a positive thing that we should do.
All right, and with that, I will open the public hearing. Are there any members of the public present in Town Center who would like to make a comment on this public hearing topic? Seeing none. Did we have any submitted online public comments?
No, sir.
All right, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Do we have any questions or comments from Mr. Howell? I didn't forget about you.
I can hear you guys mostly, but no questions for me.
All right. Do we have any discussion among the commission before we make a motion? All right, hearing none, would anyone like to make a motion?
I motion that we approve the definition changes to this ordinance.
All right, we have a motion and a second to recommend approval of zoning text amendment 25-02. Will We'll just go around the dais. Go with Commissioner Long.
Yes.
Commissioner Hutchins?
Yes.
Commissioner Kurtz?
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Luna?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Commissioner Howell?
I vote to affirm that.
All right, motion passes 7-0. Moving on to item 9.2, planning for stakeholder input regarding Planning Commission recommended amendments to Article 13, the parking regulations. If staff could read us in.
Yes, sir. If you recall, we have on our work program the discussion, and this was also an item that you discussed with council at your joint work session back in October. Last year, the Planning Commission had recommended approval of some amendments to Article 13 for parking regulations, and the council had some questions about the amendments, and there was some discussion that council members had received from some businesses in town about, you know, there being some concern about some of the regulations that were in the ordinance. And so council and the Planning Commission agreed that, similar to the FAR discussion, that the Planning Commission would seek public input into the parking regulations and then evaluate the recommended changes from before to see if there were any changes that the Planning Commission would recommend, either, you know, taking back some of the changes or maybe even making some new changes to that. So I wanted to offer that we do a similar, or have a similar work session with, and getting the word out to, you know, the business community, citizens, to say, if you're interested in talking about parking, the Planning Commission is going to have a work session, since, as Mrs. Luna stated, it was, the last work session seemed to be very successful. So doing that same approach again, I'm thinking at your June meeting to talk about parking. I have had a conversation with a couple of members of the Economic Development Committee, and they liked that idea. The thought was that, you know, not only really talking about the ordinance as it is right now, but maybe even getting some input for, or thoughts about, and I believe Mr. Howell has mentioned this before as we've talked about parking, in talking about, you know, this Main Street designation or downtown area and how parking there may be different and may have some different standards and regulations than it would be in other areas, like Colonial Avenue, and maybe even thinking about, you know, what changes might be helpful along Colonial Avenue. So would like to get your permission to add or get your input if you think we need to do something different on scheduling a work session at your June meeting like we did for FAR to talk about parking and open up that dialogue.
So you're not talking about a separate meeting, you're talking about part of our regular meeting?
Yes, sir. Just like we did with FAR. With FAR, we had the regular business meeting, and then we didn't adjourn. It was just everyone went out into the audience, basically, and began the work session, which was really the ability to have a face-to-face, informal, more informal discussion back and forth. And then, you know, staff took notes and everything on that.
Okay, my foggy memory didn't recall that was an actual regular meeting time.
We did.
I have a real problem with 13th of June, if that's what our next meeting is.
We're going to check the meeting date.
It's June the 12th.
June the 12th?
12th, I'm sorry.
Thursday.
The 12th would be, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't.
That doesn't help.
If it's anywhere near the 14th, yeah, I have a problem. But that doesn't mean it can't go, but I probably wouldn't be able to be there whole meeting. That's my personal situation.
The comment that I would make is if we're gonna do that, then we might wanna actually go through the Alliance Group, because that is all the businesses. So I can follow up with you on that.
That would be great. I mean, getting the word out is very important, so any connections
Yeah,
that you have is great to do that.
And, yeah, I'd endorse that. We need, I mean, obviously, we can't get the input of tourists who are coming to town, but I think they can be represented by some of the owners of accommodation, some of the inns and bed and breakfasts here in town could probably represent those interests. I think inviting a representative of downtown Colonial Beach to join us would be a good thing to do. And I think it will be interesting to hear from, if we can invite them to come, other business owners, perhaps restaurant owners, who have challenges of parking for their staff, so that we can get that input as well. In my discussions in town, I've heard that as a big concern. So I think it'll be important to have that group of people understand that this is something that would be valuable for them to attend. And I guess my only question is a 5:30 start suitable for them? For some business people, it's difficult to be here that early, but I guess the public hearing wouldn't start till 6.
Yes, the workshop wouldn't start till, we finish with the regular business.
And I think that they have brought this to the council, if I'm correct, and so there is a keen interest on this issue. So I think getting the word out as best we can and making sure that the agencies with the Alliance and then the Economic Development Committee and even the Chamber, yeah.
I definitely second about getting the information out about the meeting, but I would also highly encourage staff to get out information about potential edits, about questions we're going to ask, because this will be the first time the public is seeing these edits. They didn't see them in post-meeting, in previous meetings. This would be kind of the first round.
When you're saying edits to the parking regulations?
Yes, what is being discussed.
Okay, because as they exist right now, I mean, and it is basically a year old now, because the Planning Commission did have a public hearing, and I don't recall council having a public hearing. I think it may have stalled at council before they had a public hearing. I do know that the parking regulations were shared, or the draft regulations were shared with the businesses, but I agree with you. We'll still make them available. I'll put
Not
them
the
on the
first
website.
time, but the
Yeah,
first time
'cause
in
it
a
has been
while.
yeah, first time in a while is absolutely
it.
true. Yes, sir.
All right, I think we have a pretty general concession about having a public input session on our meeting in June. I don't think we need to take a vote on that, but we can work that into next meeting's agenda. All right, item 9.3, I believe, the commission's work plan.
Yes, sir. So I provided a new updated copy of your work plan, and I added for you the item number 4. And so I did an update, which I will for your next version, the fact that the town council approved Article 17 as you had recommended to them at their public hearing on April the 16th. That's item 1. So item 1 is complete. For the FAR, we are having our public hearing this evening, and we anticipate bringing this to council in June. They've got a heavy agenda for their May meeting for budget. It's that time. So we anticipate bringing this to council at their work session in January, and June, not January. Don't know, I don't know. In June, and getting them to have a public hearing at their regular meeting in June. So hopefully we will then have completed item 2. Item 3 we just talked about, that's the parking and having the work session. I'll update the agenda with that. Item 4 I added, and it's a fairly small item, but I think it's an important item. And the town attorney and I have talked about needing to look at the woodlot management section of Article 22 of the Chesapeake Bay regulations that we have in the zoning ordinance, and specifically to be clear in the ordinance on what is permitted as far as trimming a tree versus removing a tree. The language in the ordinance right now says removing a tree. There's no definition of removal. I don't know that we'll add a definition of removal. DEQ doesn't have a definition of tree removal, but there are lots of definitions relative to, and other ordinances that have examples of what trimming you're allowed to do within a resource management area, which the town is in a whole, and in a resource protection area, which obviously those are along the waterways, streams, wetlands. So we will be bringing that to you, want to bring that to you at your next meeting for discussion. So hopefully we can go ahead and do that. Maybe you'll feel comfortable scheduling a public hearing on that, and then we'll do that. And then the next item we have 2 number 4s. That's wrong. I got to renumber. But anyway, there's not 2 number 4s. There's a new number 5, which is the revisions to R1 and R2. So I'll get that updated too, and bring your work plan back next month.
Any comments from the commission on our work plan?
Just a quick question about the woodlot, since I'm not familiar with Article 22. When you say trimming, you said what trimming is allowed. Well, is there trimming required also in there?
So there's no trimming required. I mean, obviously, to maintain healthy trees, you should trim them or prune them on the basis that is healthy for that particular species of tree. But there's no requirement in the ordinance to trim. What we have had is people that have said that they were trimming or pruning a tree, but pruning it or trimming it to the point where it basically was left unhealthy, and so it, in essence, was dead.
No, I understand that.
So we're trying to avoid that type of situation in the future by making our ordinance clear.
But trimming a tree for safety purposes is also
Permitted.
something that, I know, for example, that the power company comes by and they will trim trees that are outside our boundary to keep them from, sometimes there are electrical wires and other type of wires that come over private property. And I just wondered if that, but you're saying that's not a requirement.
We don't regulate when the power company decides that they need to trim the tree because of the safety of the power lines. They do that. We wouldn't have in our zoning ordinance a regulation relative to that. Obviously, they have an easement, so within their easement, they are allowed to trim the trees. So our ordinance won't affect Dominion Power or the power company being able to do what it needs to do.
Yes, okay.
Seeing no other questions or comments, are we still taking a vote on this?
If you want
we
to, you can, that's entirely up to you. If everybody's
Nah,
agreeable
all right.
with it, I'm okay, everybody just saying, yeah, that sounds good.
Yep. All right, seeing no new business, moving on to Community Development and Zoning Director comments. Any updates for this month?
Yes, I don't have any, except one thing, I would like to apologize to Mr. Hutchins, because Mr. Hutchins, as well as Ms. Luna, asked me last month to send them a link to the meeting. However, I received Ms. Luna's, but I did not receive Mr. Hutchins until after the meeting, and I saw it after the meeting, and I was like, oh no. So I do apologize. In your email, when I sent your packet out to you, I was letting you all know that because of all the emails that I get, the best way and easiest way to make sure that I see your email is to use my darla.org email, because that's on my phone. I have it all the time, and, you know, I might read it at 2 o'clock in the morning, you never know. But I always have that email. And then if ever you all need me, you certainly have my phone number, right? Call me, text me like Miss Luna did the evening of the meeting last time, say, hey, I haven't seen the link yet, which I was glad she did, because that way I was able to make sure that we got that to her. So, Mr. Hutchinson's, I do apologize to you. Oh, good. I'm sure you were. It was very interesting what you missed.
All right, and with that, the Planning Commission will next meet at its regular scheduled meeting on Thursday, June 12th at 5:30 in Town Center. As all business included in tonight's agenda has concluded, we are adjourned.
Mr. Chairman, may I address the body? I just wanted to, with your permission, I wanted to thank everyone from the preponderance of the town council, the robust CIP that you guys sent to us. I know sometimes it's like playing ping pong, but it was a wonderful document, very rich in detail, and we wanted to make sure that you guys know how much we do appreciate it. Thank you.